Close your eyes and picture this. You wake up in a world where the streets are buried under walls of ice, the temperature is colder than Antarctica, and your cozy home offers no protection. The internet? Gone. Electricity? Gone. Supermarkets? Empty. Suddenly, survival doesn't mean ordering food online. It means hunting animals with your own hands, starting a fire with stones, and living inside caves. This was life during the Ice Age. And here's the terrifying truth. If modern humans were thrown back into that world today, more than 90% of us would be dead within the first year. The question is, would you be among the survivors, or would the Ice Age claim you too? Imagine waking up tomorrow to find that your entire city has vanished under towering walls of ice. The streets you once walked are buried, the houses are crushed, and the air itself feels like knives against your skin. The Ice Age was not just a season of cold, it was a relentless test of human survival, and if modern humans were suddenly thrown back into that era, almost 90% of us would not last more than a few months. Why? Because the Ice Age demanded skills, instincts, and endurance that most of us no longer have. Survival was not about comfort, it was about clawing your way through every single day. Picture this, temperatures so low that even Antarctica today would feel warm in comparison. Food so scarce that finding a single animal could mean the difference between life and death. And predators roaming the frozen world, ready to hunt you as easily as you might hunt them. Now you might think, with all our technology and intelligence, surely we'd manage. But hold that thought, because a little later, I will reveal a shocking truth about food in the Ice Age that will make you realize just how helpless most of us would actually be. During the Ice Age, humans did not have electricity, heating systems, or thick down jackets designed in factories. They had only what nature offered: stone, bone, fire, and instinct. Making fire itself was a skill, not a luxury, and failing to spark one on a freezing night was often a death sentence. Think about it. When was the last time you lit a fire with your bare hands, using only wood and stone? For us, fire is a button on a stove, a click of a lighter, but for them, it was the very heartbeat of survival. And then comes the question of food. In a world covered by glaciers, farming as we know it today did not exist. Wheat, rice, corn, none of these comforts of modern agriculture were available. People relied on hunting massive beasts like mammoths and bison and gathering roots, berries, and whatever edible plants they could find. Later, I will tell you the dark truth about what happened when the food ran out, and I promise it will surprise you. The climate itself was merciless. Average global temperatures were 12 to 15 degrees Celsius colder than they are now, and in some regions the chill could kill within hours if you were exposed without shelter. Glaciers swallowed entire landscapes, covering Europe and North America beneath sheets of ice thicker than skyscrapers. Modern humans live in heated apartments, work in offices, and move around in cars. We are not built for that kind of exposure anymore. If you were suddenly stripped of your clothes and forced to survive in those conditions, even for a single day, what are your real chances? Ask yourself honestly. Could you track down a wild animal, kill it with primitive weapons, skin it, cook it over an open fire, and use its hide to keep yourself warm? Because that's exactly what our ancestors had to do to see another sunrise. And the truth is, most of us today wouldn't even know where to begin. But there was something even more dangerous than the cold. The Ice Age was filled with predators, saber-toothed cats, cave lions, giant wolves, and packs of hyenas that could strip a carcass in minutes. Humans were not the kings of the food chain back then. They were often the prey. Imagine leaving your cave in search of food and hearing the growl of a saber-tooth from the shadows. Do you think your gym workouts or your city life has prepared you for that? A single mistake, a moment of weakness, and you became dinner. Later, I'll share a detail about how Ice Age humans actually defended themselves against such creatures, and it will completely change the way you think about primitive humans. Another brutal reality of the Ice Age was community survival. No one survived alone. Families and tribes were the only lifeline because hunting large animals required teamwork, and defending a cave against predators needed every hand available. Our ancestors shared everything: food, shelter, protection. Compare that to the modern world, where so many of us live isolated, behind screens, disconnected from real human cooperation. Would you be able to rely on your neighbors for survival? Would your friends know how to trap an animal, build a shelter, or track footprints across snow for miles? Without a tribe, you wouldn't make it. And here's where the shock comes. Scientists believe that the very reason our species survived the Ice Age was not strength or intelligence alone, but our ability to cooperate, to form bonds, and to rely on each other. Without community, there was no survival. Now let's talk about something many people never think about: food shortages. Hunting a mammoth might sound like an easy way to get meat for months, but what if you fail? What if the hunt goes wrong? Or your group is injured, or the herds migrate far away? Archaeologists have found evidence that during the hardest winters, Ice Age humans sometimes resorted to desperate measures. Some studies suggest there were cases of cannibalism when starvation struck tribes. Yes, that's the shocking truth I mentioned earlier. Imagine hunger so fierce, so merciless, that you're forced to turn on your own kind. Does that sound like something modern? Humans accustomed to supermarkets and online deliveries could handle? Most of us would break long before reaching that point. And yet, despite the unimaginable conditions, our ancestors survived. They adapted, they innovated, and slowly they found ways to tame fire, to sharpen tools, to use caves and bones as shelter, and to outsmart predators. Every single one of us alive today is living proof of their resilience. But here's the bitter irony. While they could survive in a frozen world of death and darkness, most of us, living in an age of technology and comfort, wouldn't last a week without our phones, heaters, and stores. You might feel strong now, safe in your city, but the Ice Age would strip away that illusion in an instant. So ask yourself this: if tomorrow the world froze again, if the sun dimmed and the glaciers returned, would you be among the few who adapt? Could you hunt, fight, and endure the endless cold? Or would you join the 90% who fall, crushed by the merciless weight of the Ice Age? But surviving the Ice Age was never just about enduring the cold or finding food. It was about living in a world where every single moment tested your ability to adapt. Imagine walking for miles across endless sheets of ice, the horizon nothing but a white void, and the silence broken only by the crunch of your footsteps. There are no landmarks, no GPS, no maps, only instinct and memory to guide you. Early humans had to memorize the stars, the shapes of mountains, and the trails of migrating animals, because losing your way meant freezing to death under the open sky. And while you're imagining this, let me tell you, later I'll share an astonishing truth about how humans used the very bones of the animals they killed, not just for tools, but for survival in ways you might never have thought possible. The cold was merciless, but hunger was even more relentless. The average Ice Age human burned thousands of calories a day just to keep their body warm in the freezing air. That meant constant hunting, constant searching, constant moving. If you stood still, if you hesitated, you starved. Compare that to modern humans sitting in chairs for hours, consuming processed meals with the click of a button. Could you run for hours across the snow with nothing but a spear in your hand? Could you chase a bison that weighs more than a car, knowing that if you fail, your entire group will go hungry for weeks? Most of us wouldn't last a day because we have forgotten what hunger truly feels like. And it wasn't just the environment or the animals that posed a threat. The Ice Age shaped human biology itself. Our ancestors had thicker bones, greater muscle density, and far more endurance than most of us today. They weren't bodybuilders with gym memberships. They were survivors hardened by necessity. Imagine carrying logs of wood, hauling giant stones, dragging animal carcasses across miles of frozen ground every day without rest, without complaint. Today we get tired walking up a few flights of stairs. Later, I'll reveal a discovery scientists made about Ice Age children that will leave you completely astonished, because even kids back then had to endure things that most modern adults couldn't handle. And then there was clothing. Primitive, rough, but life-saving. Forget about fashion or comfort, because during the Ice Age, clothes were armor. Skins and furs from animals like reindeer and mammoths weren't just protection from the cold. They were the line between life and death. Archaeologists have found evidence that humans stitched together multiple layers of hides using bone needles, creating early forms of parkas and boots. Could you sew your own clothes from scratch? Could you skin an animal with stone tools and turn it into something wearable before the cold killed you? That was survival. That was daily life. But even with clothes, fire, and shelter, the Ice Age was a war of patience. You might have food today, warmth today, but tomorrow could bring a storm that buries your shelter under 10 feet of snow. The winds could shift, herds could migrate, and suddenly your entire tribe could be left without food or resources. This is where cooperation became the ultimate weapon. Unlike predators who fought each other, humans shared knowledge, shared tasks, and shared survival. They passed down fire-making techniques, hunting strategies, and even myths and stories that kept their spirits alive. And here's something fascinating. Scientists believe that the pressure of the Ice Age may have been one of the driving forces that developed human language and imagination. Imagine huddling in a cave with your tribe, firelight flickering on the walls, while someone tells a story that explains the world outside. Those stories weren't entertainment. They were survival manuals wrapped in myth, instructions disguised as legends. And a little later, I'll tell you how art itself, yes, the paintings on cave walls, were not just decoration, but a survival tool that carried wisdom across generations. And yet, despite everything, despite the endless cold, the predators, the starvation, humans managed to do something extraordinary. They thrived. They adapted so completely to this frozen world that they began to push predators away, to dominate landscapes, and to slowly build the foundations of everything we now take for granted. But don't mistake their triumph for ease. Every step forward was carved out of suffering, out of pain, out of near-death experiences. Modern humans, cushioned by technology, comfort, and convenience, would crumble under that same pressure. The Ice Age would strip away every illusion of strength, every layer of comfort, until only raw instinct remained. And here's the chilling thought. If the world were to freeze again, if the sun dimmed and the glaciers returned, how many of us could truly rise to that challenge? Would you be among the rare few who relearn the ancient ways, who fight and endure against all odds? Or would you join the countless others, fading quietly into the snow, swallowed whole by the merciless Ice Age? As the endless winter of the Ice Age pressed down upon the world, survival became a task so unforgiving that even the strongest animals sometimes fell to its cruelty. And for humans, it was not just about strength or bravery, but about mastering every inch of a hostile environment that seemed designed to kill them at every turn, because storms didn't simply arrive and pass. They roared across the frozen plains like monsters of air and snow, tearing apart shelters, burying trails, and dropping temperatures so fast that an unprepared body could freeze solid before the sun rose again, and rivers that once gave life turned into vast glassy highways of ice, cutting off tribes from food, forcing them to march endlessly in search of sustenance, their footprints vanishing behind them as the blizzards erased every trace of their journey. And yet somehow, humans adapted. They learned to treat the land as both an enemy and a teacher, memorizing the smallest clues. An indentation in the snow, the faint smell of musk carried on the wind, the broken branches of trees crushed under a mammoth's feet. And from these signs they tracked prey across impossible distances, sometimes walking for days with nothing but the hope of meat driving them forward. Because failure wasn't just disappointment, it meant starvation for the entire tribe. It meant children crying through the night with hollow bellies and mothers tearing strips of leather just to chew on something, anything, to silence the hunger. And still, they pushed on, driven by an instinct that most modern humans have lost completely. Later, I will reveal to you an astonishing way they preserved food, a method that required no machines, no technology, but sheer brilliance in using the frozen world to their advantage, a detail that will make you realize just how resourceful they truly were. But the Ice Age didn't only threaten the body, it waged war on the human mind, because fear and despair were enemies just as deadly as wolves and saber-toothed cats. Imagine weeks of gray skies where the sun was little more than a pale smudge in the clouds. Imagine nights when the howling wind outside your cave never ceased. And imagine staring at your last scraps of food, knowing they wouldn't last till morning. Would you have the mental strength to endure that silence, or would hopelessness consume you? To survive, humans built more than shelters. They built meaning. They created rituals. They told stories around the fire that flickered against the walls of their caves, and those stories carried more than comfort. They carried knowledge. The paintings of bison, mammoths, and hunters were not idle art. They were coded survival guides, marking migration patterns, recording the habits of predators, and teaching the next generation where life could be found when death pressed too close. And while those flames danced and shadows moved across the stone, imagination itself became a weapon, a shield against despair, and perhaps even the spark of what we now call human culture. Think of it. Without the brutality of the Ice Age, without the constant demand to record, remember, and share, perhaps language itself would not have grown the way it did. Perhaps creativity would have remained a whisper instead of becoming the roaring fire it is today. But still, survival was never guaranteed, for even the cleverest tribes faced nights when the cold was too sharp, when predators prowled too close, when storms sealed the mouth of caves with walls of snow. And in those moments, only the stubborn will to endure separated the living from the dead. Now, put yourself in that cave, wrapped in hides, staring at the painted walls, while hunger gnaws at your belly, and the cries of wolves echo in the distance. Could you last? Could you summon the strength to go on, to fight for one more sunrise? Or would you crumble, another forgotten soul, lost beneath the endless, merciless snows of the Ice Age? Beyond the hunger, beyond the cold, beyond the endless pursuit of food and fire, there was another silent enemy of the Ice Age that made survival almost impossible: the frailty of the human body itself. Because in that frozen world, the smallest wound could become a death sentence, a toothache could grow into agony that lasted for months, and an infection from a single cut could spread like wildfire through the blood, ending a life before the next sunrise. There were no hospitals, no doctors, no miracle cures, only knowledge passed down through trial, error, and sheer desperation. Imagine a hunter returning to camp with a deep gash from a predator's claw. In our world, he would be rushed to surgery, but in theirs, the tribe gathered around with sharpened stone blades, animal sinew for stitching, and herbs crushed into pastes to fight the fever. Archaeologists have uncovered skulls from this era that show signs of primitive surgery, holes deliberately carved into bone to release pressure from the brain, teeth pulled with rough tools, broken limbs set with splints made of wood and hide. Can you even imagine enduring that kind of pain without anesthesia, without medicine, relying only on the will to survive? Most of us would collapse under the first wave of agony, but they endured because they had no other choice. Later, I'll reveal something even more astonishing: how these painful trials actually shaped human immunity, leaving traces in our DNA that protect us even today. But the suffering was not only physical, it was emotional. Death was constant, woven into the fabric of daily life. A child lost to fever, a hunter swallowed by ice, an elder frozen in the night. Every loss threatened the strength of the tribe, but instead of breaking, they carried grief as a burden of fuel, weaving it into rituals, songs, and stories so that the dead lived on as guides for the living. Imagine yourself in that situation, the fire flickering, your wound burning with infection, your tribe whispering prayers carved from hope rather than certainty. Could you endure the pain long enough to heal? Could you keep walking with cracked bones and blistered skin, knowing that to stop meant death not only for you, but for those who depended on you? Or would the very weight of suffering break you before the cold ever did? The Ice Age demanded this kind of endurance from every human being, and it left behind a legacy written in scars, bones, and bloodlines. And that is the haunting truth. Our ancestors carved resilience into their very bodies. But whether that resilience still lies dormant within us, or whether it has been buried under centuries of comfort, is the question that will decide if modern humans could survive should the ice return again. And so, when we stand here in the comfort of our modern world, our heated homes, our stocked supermarkets, our glowing screens, it is almost impossible to truly comprehend the brutal reality of the Ice Age, a time when survival was not measured in days or weeks, but in every breath taken against the cold, every fire sparked against the darkness, every hunt fought against hunger. Our ancestors endured storms that could bury mountains, predators that hunted them as prey, and illnesses that could kill with a single wound. Yet they adapted, they cooperated, they invented, and against all odds they survived. We, their descendants, are living proof of their resilience, the beneficiaries of their sacrifices, and the carriers of their unbroken chain of endurance. But here lies the uncomfortable truth. Strip away our machines, our electricity, our medicine, and our networks of convenience, and most of us would collapse before the first week had ended. 90% of modern humans would vanish beneath the snow, not because we lack intelligence, but because centuries of comfort have softened the instincts that once burned in our blood. And yet, there is a spark inside us still, a buried memory of fire and stone, of hunters and gatherers, of storytellers in caves and warriors on frozen plains. Perhaps the lesson of the Ice Age is not just a warning of how fragile we are, but a reminder of how strong we can be when pushed to the edge. The question is no longer could our ancestors survive. They already proved that they could. The question is, if the world froze tomorrow, if the sun dimmed and the glaciers returned to claim the earth once more, would you awaken that ancient fire within yourself, or would you vanish quietly into the snow, forgotten by time, another soul claimed by the merciless Ice Age?